The famous cowboys who roamed the Old West. In the Old West, cowboys created their own style and reputation, although they were glamorized in books and movies. Still, did you know that being called a cowboy suddenly became an insult at some point? Actually, there's a story behind that, and you'll discover more about it at the end of this video. But before that, here's our story of a famous cowboy. Before Henry McCarty was Billy the Kid, he was just a young kid raised by her mom in the slums in New York City. But in his teenage years, he became an orphan because her mother died from tuberculosis. Fortunately, a herdsman who later became his father figure hired him as a cowboy. But one day, his rancher was shot just because he was against prominent cattle barons. Billy was heartbroken, so he promised to hunt down responsible ones. Since then, he went astray and lived a dangerous life. Next was Robert Leroy Parker. In his childhood, his family suffered from an impoverished situation because of having many members. So to help them, he began working in ranches, and at that time he let himself to a closed store, where he took a pair of overalls and only left a letter, promising to pay when he was back. However, the store owner got pissed off and had him arrested instead. Many believe that since then, he became resentful to the law system, and later on became the infamous Butch Cassidy of the Wild Bunch Gang. Then John Wesley Hardin. He was known as the deadliest cowboy in the Old West. Ever since, he already had a bad temper and anger issues. That's why he has been in and out of prison. When he was pardoned, he was hired by a rancher as a trail boss for a cattle drive. But in a few weeks, he lost his cool and got arrested again. While in jail, he tried to change for good. He studied law there and even continued after release. But sadly, his fiery attitude had caught into him and met a miserable death. In contrast, we've got Ike Clanton. His family was rather well off, as they operated the biggest ranch in their area. Eventually, they came into dispute with the Earp brothers for their notoriety and blatant recklessness. To get rid of them, Ike instigated a ploy that turned into a bloody shootout in OK Corral. But ironically, it instead cost the life of his brother Billy and his closest cohorts, the McClorys. Ike even tried to charge the Earps with murder, but they got acquitted instead. And despite all of that, Ike didn't stop his mayhem, but did even worse. So unlike the other infamous gentlemen's tragic circumstances that led them to turn into outlaws, Ike was an exception since he was already one ever since the beginning. Back in the day, most cowboys were known as men doing an exceptional job. In fact, they rode their horses to drive thousands of cattle and roam the frontier. But their image was eventually ruined as cattle rustling gangs such as the Clantons began calling themselves the Cowboys. Their ranch that seemed to be successful was all a ploy. They were selling stolen cattle from the Mexican border. And aside from robbing stagecoaches and teamsters, they even committed murders. The chaos and mayhem of their deeds brought trauma and fear, staining the once glorious profession, the cowboy. You have discovered an amazing story about the Old West famous cowboys. And now click this and discover what was the life of cowboys like.